this is a collaborative work I have with my colleagues, and you can see three of us actually from three cities. That's the reason we actually have this comparative work to start. And the last, so this work, to be honest, is offered out of my comfort zone because I'm a quantitative sociologist, but this is qualitative. So so the fourth author, like my colleague Mei Xiao, she is a ethnographer. So we add her actually to help us really deepen our understanding of this. So, okay, so let's see how. So this idea is actually coming from a thing called the having it all, right? It's a dilemma of like, especially with increasing female labor force participation, like women around the world are actually like you're gonna do struggle. There's one struggle they face a lot is how to balance work and family, right? And I found, so you say the self-image of the women nowadays is from like devoted mothers to actually having it all, right? You have to strong in work and strong in motherhood. And I found this book actually probably 20 years ago by business school people. I'm saying like, okay, so how to have it all and making it work, right? So there's a ways you can do that. There's steps of doing that. And people actually start questioning about this thing called having it all, because it's kind of like a myth of choice for women. So Messner and her colleague have this paper in Gender and Society called, this is actually one form called soft essentialism. This myth of choice is really about like so we said women have the right to choose between work and family, or you have to straddle between work and family. But then on the other hand, men are continue actually naturally to viewed as the breadwinner, right? So it's kind of the women's choice, right to choose. Okay, so they're saying like, oh, this is one form of this soft essentialism. And later, I think many of you know this work by Mary Brinton, right? She's a family demographer, and she talked about fertility perspective. And one of her interests, she did several works related to the comparative understanding of gender ideology. And what she found is that when we talk about gender ideology, we kind of put work and family on a continuum. Right. So either you want to do family or you're going to do that. And there's a transition, naturally transition of women going to the labor force in an increasing pace and in large numbers, and people are going to change their views. And then she found it's actually not. Work and family are actually separate norms in operating in the around the world. And when you think they are two separate views or norms associated with work and families, you actually can have a variety of combinations across this, societies. And she identified, in this paper in PDR, she identified actually there are 4 types of combinations. So there's one type we usually think the traditional, right? Traditional means women are considered as the homemaker, men considered breadwinner, so that's traditional. And there are one called full egalitarian. So you have to do both, men and women both have to do both. Okay. And there's one called flexible egalitarian, means, okay, you can choose, right? You can choose either one, you can choose that, but you can shift and then. And she found a very peculiar combinations called pro-work conservative. Okay. It's saying like you're gonna do well in both. You're gonna be a devoted worker, you're gonna be a devoted homemaker, especially for women. And guess who actually fall into that category? It's the East Asian women, right? So they use this to explain why, from the fertility perspective, why East Asian society has the lowest low fertility around the world, because you're gonna expect women to do both, excel in both areas, and then they cannot do that. Then they forgot one. Okay. And later, and then they were talking about a lot of like the norms and what's the solutions of work flexibility is one thing. Okay, so you have to make work flexible. You have to help them to combine these two. And if you can see, they have many publications around this area. And then nowadays they're talking about how really work flexibility help women, or they actually impede their development, whatever. And we found that one thing is interesting, because when we talk actually about work-family conflict, we talk about mothers who are working, right? So working mothers belong to this category, but there are another type of mothers who's usually out of the picture of discussion is the stay-at-home mothers. So we're gonna the reason we didn't talk using this kind of using location type of term for them is when during the interviews they have a hard time to qualify them as non-employed, and they don't want to call themselves non-work. So it's kind of very hard for them to define themselves. So it's like, okay, we'll call it stay-at-home mothers. So Olgar had this interesting book. This book actually inspired this work. Is something called Heading Home. So it's talking about UK stay-at-home mothers and how they actually do after how they make the decision, what their life look like after they actually making the decision, what's the struggle they face and things like that. And why we usually exclude this group? Because we think they are leaving voluntarily. They make the choice, right? They leave, and because they think not working is a good thing, or think there's a different type of woman. But especially when thinking like more like a flexible type of egalitarian means they can choose, right? Either they go home and they don't want to work. These people are probably the ones they don't want to work. But if you look at the literature, there are not many, but there are calling this opting out. And there are three main findings here. So first, they call it opting out, means they believe they choose to leave. But then they are having this negative consequence on themselves is they have low satisfaction, they have low self-esteem. So this is kind of cross-quantitative studies. And what we do is so three of us are actually doing comparative work, and because Muzheng has this funding, right? So he had the funding and he applied it and we got it. And but other than that, the reason we choose comparative is it's not many comparative work are actually done qualitatively. So we're kind of trying to see how that thing has been working. And we choose a similar group, and we choose Chinese college-educated mothers for these reasons, because they hold strongly about this thing called pro-work conservative. And so it means they have very strong work ethics. So they have to work. So that's very strong. But these three cities actually operate in different contexts. So Shanghai is on one side, they have very generous intergenerational support for childcare. Means you have your grandparents to help you, most likely. But they have on the other side, below age 12, and they fluent in Mandarin. So the interviews are done in Mandarin. And a few things I want to say about this group is if you look at the trend of Chinese female labor force participation, you see a reversal trend in recent years. So in the before the 1980s, before the economic reform, Chinese women has the highest female labor force participation around the world, one of the highest. So it's over 90% of them are actually working. And since the economic reform, and you do see a gradual change, means they're declining of the percentage of women who are actually in the labor force. And we did another study and found like mothers are have leaving the market on compared to other groups. They have a higher rates of leaving. And the college educated is not that many, but this group is kind of have about like 10%. If you look at the data across, they're in about 10% of this college educated mothers actually leave, not working or stay at home. So it's difficult to understand this group, because usually education gives women that you have to work, right? So you have to be economically independent, and they hold strongly about that view. But these are kind of like opposed the trend. So we focus them exclusively, and this is I want to say one thing about the data is first, because immigration is one thing across these cities, so we kind of choose sample, like in Shanghai, there will be local Shanghai people and non-local Shanghai people by hukou standard. And in Singapore, there will be immigrants and PR status or not. And in New York City, there will be immigrants or they have the work visa or not. But the other thing I want to say is if you look at the dates, COVID, Shanghai data collected before the COVID, and the other two are collected during the COVID. But I'm not going to talk about COVID findings in this talk. Okay, so these are the ones we published already on this thing called opting out. So this thing called, how do you understand that in each society? What's the understanding of this thing called opting out? And we found it's most likely it's going to be a forced choice. So it's a choice, but it's not like you choose freely or in some extent. But the one thing about returning, when we collect the data, I think there's one thing I like about qualitative interviews is that you kind of surprise you in some sense. Because we usually think like, what's your life look like? What's the childcare look like? How do you make decisions and things like that? And then during the interviews, you see them touch these issues again and again about they're talking about returning. So when you ask them in their life, they say, okay, I want to return. So we say, after writing about their opting out options, and then what about returning to work? What's that look like? And the puzzles we have is that why do these mothers from all three cities almost never really return to work? We're going to sort of finding about that, despite the expressed intention to do so. So basically means they want to return, but they don't really return. Okay. And then the question is, what this idea? So returning to work is kind of an idea, right? So intention. So is that a rebellion towards self-essentialism or reconfirmation of it? So what's that mean? And this is, let's say, return to work is an idea, not to action. As if you think like when they express they want to return, you see the majority of them have this idea of returning. And if you look at preparations, they do preparations. When we say preparations means they take courses, they consider about doing some trainings, or they plan to do some trainings, or they do like part-time jobs, or especially they open online small shops, right? Like Taobao and all these other, they do a lot of online kind of sellings or Amazon kind of thing. And but the full return means really return back to the labor market, usually the college educated people belong to. That's very few. So work is kind of a common pursuit, but few actually put in real action. So that's something we are puzzled about. Okay. So one thing we think about for the literature is they don't have enough support, right? So, and it's certainly in those societies, and if you look across the context, they actually face different obstacles. Here's a list. If you buy family support and labor market support, but they lack different type of support. Talking about the finding may not surprising you first, because if you see Shanghai, the positive thing is you get a lot of international support for childcare, but it's hard to return to labor market because you have career gaps. So labor market in China, they're not flexible in terms of career gaps. And then there is an age limit in a lot of positions. And also there are social norms to value about stay-at-home mothers, because you should work, right? So why you have this gap? So they have like, so labor market is kind of against those people. But you got New York City, that's the social environment is much friendly, and you don't have ageism, right? So it's in the workplace. But negative, it's kind of like it's affordable childcare. You don't have parents to help you, and there are language barriers and things associated with it. And as expected, Singapore is kind of somewhere in between. Okay. But okay. So the question is, like, if we stop here, it's kind of like we found what the other found. And then there's one day Michelle asked this question, like, if we look at data, there's one thing, she's not a family demographer belong to this area. She's doing medical sociology. So she's, I don't know this literature at all. So why do they want to return? So it's a kind of outside of question. It's like, why they all express that feeling? So what's kind of, so, okay, so that's something interesting. If you look at commonalities, what's the commonality here? And there's something called about they just not unsatisfied with their current life. Okay. And this unsatisfaction comes from this profound feeling of insecurity. Okay, there's a few quotes here so it said, like, the first saying, when I went out for musical and I saw many young women and they look beautiful, and I don't have that anymore, I think, because I'm not working. Or the other one said, like, okay, so I was sponsored by my husband. What if my marriage fails, right? And also they said, also they have pressures from the parents' generation saying, okay, so I invest a lot of effort on you and you are not working. So this kind of like this return to work have this very feeling of insecurity, and also they want to return because their work is not that valued. Like they say, okay, so they're saying, like, because the kind of work we do cannot be quantified and people don't see it, right? I do childcare, but no one really see or quantify my value of doing the childcare. And also in saying all I do is trivial things, right? So I do this and do that and things. And so you can be replaced. You don't doing work that produce value in some sense. So this is kind of like a general thing coming out of all these interviews, not to one specific cities or societies. They all have shared this thing. And so we think that work, like this strong desire to work, is kind of a remedy for insecurity, right? There's a way they're thinking they're out, one way to out this. And they feel this insecurity and about their financial dependency, and the work is not fully appreciated, but return can maybe alleviate such insecurity, because once you're working, one is connected to society in an appropriate, full manner. Only working one is able to feel self-worthy and acquire a sense of security and certainty. And also they believe, this is interesting, as they say, it's their own responsibility to jump back to the labor market. So you choose to leave and you choose to return. Okay, and they said all the husband and all the grandparents, all the parents are support them to return. But as you are educated, you have the education, it's your responsibility to find ways to do that. And also for this group, there is a strong expectation to be independent, diligent, self-responsible, and you should do that. You should be able to do that. And but just want to mention one thing here before my conclusion is that there is a separation, between their see themselves as they see their role as mothers. So once they have this, all they're talking about this, and then they still believe that decision to leave is the right choice. It's good for their kids, and they're doing a good job for motherhood. But then the question is about, what about for me? So there is a distinction between these two types of identities in this group. And so we said it's a different problem facing for women in different societies, but they're kind of like the same reason. Is leaving is a forced choice, then returning is an illusion remedy. And they're operating under the same logic of this thing called self-essentialism, having it all influence decisions or the entities a lot. Yeah, thank you.